Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to go through and just give you a quick demo of how the conditional logic fields work with WP Job Manager Field Editor. And then I'm going to go through, I'm going to go ahead and delete all of them, and then I'm going to go through setting up each one and show you how everything works, show you where the options are, and let you kind of know how my thought process was when setting all this up, so that it makes it easy for you when you want to actually go and configure your site and set all yours up. So first, let's start off and go ahead and go through the actual demo. So as you can see here, the page, we're not actually showing anything. So as you can see, we have just the job title is showing, and then this right here saying, do you want to include company details? So I will show you real quick the different logic groups that are set up. You see all these different here. So let's go ahead and go through the demo, and I'll show you how it works. So on the job title, let's go ahead and just type in, title. So now this shows, and now we have a bunch of different options that end up showing up. Our location, job type. So let's go ahead and change the job type. So you see job type we have set as full-time. Let's change it to freelance. Well, so we have it configured to hide that salary field if it's not full-time. So we go there. Now we'll come down here, and we're going to say, okay, what kind of category is this in? Let's say programmer. Now we get another option that shows here. It says, which type do we have? So we can either select front end, and this will give us some different ones where we can select different front end languages. We can also select back end, which gives it, and then you see different languages here. We can select different here. You can even close this out and remove that. Let's go ahead and show this. And now we have this. You can select years experience, and let's say, okay, languages. Let's pick Node and then PHP. Oh, look, there was one that showed up just for PHP. So what I'm trying to show you here in this example is that you can set up very intricate and nested, in a sense, logic for your site, really based on anything you need. So as you can see, we didn't actually show this one right here, PHP experience, until we actually got to this point. And then obviously, this one's a little slider, so you could literally set it up for anything. If this is equal to 17 years, show this field. And when we remove it, that gets removed as well. And it's just one of those things I was kind of trying to go through and show you how different logic works. And the good thing about this is you can set different fields to show and hide, and with all the different available options you have, including even just HTML fields, which isn't a field type that gets saved, you could even set up some kind of conditional logic, as you'll see in here. So we have job description foul words, and you can see here, and I'll go through all these options. I'm just showing you this real quick to kind of give you an overview. So you can see here, this is compiled with that. So let's go ahead and type in, and look at that. This is a custom HTML field that we have set up in our fields, and it's just showing because of that logic we set up. I just wanted to give you a real quick overview and show you the logic and give you a demo of what we're going to be setting up. I'm going to go through each one of these fields, setting them all up, configuring them, and determining how to set up the different logic that you want to use. So let's go ahead and get on over to the conditional fields, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go ahead and just remove all of these different fields, or all of these different groups, we'll say. It might take me just a second to do. I just want to give you a demo before I actually removed everything. So real quick while I'm doing this as well, this is, I know I mentioned this earlier, but this has been some features that have been in the works for a very long time, and I do apologize to any of you guys that have been waiting patiently on this. But I will let you know that your patience is going to be rewarded now with a fully functional logic setup group that you can configure, and I am happy to say that a lot of work was put into this to make sure that it is as optimized, fast, and functional as possible. And along the way, if you have issues, you find things that don't work, or even if you need something, let me know. Open a support ticket. I'm open to suggestions. Let me know how I can help you, and I'll let you know if that's something that's possible or not. So first thing we'll do is, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go ahead and make sure and set up all your different fields that you're going to want to have. And just for this example, you can see I've disabled application. I don't recommend doing that. I've only disabled this just to make it easy for you to see how it's set up and how it works. So that's just what that is. And so you'll see here that I have a few custom fields that I've set up. And so we've got our job category here, and then we have this one right here, which is dev front end or back end. And so this is basically gives you an option, where you can select front end, back end. Those were those radio options we set. Then you see we have years experience, back end languages, PHP experience. You're basically going to and I honestly recommend coming up with your logic on pencil and paper, and just kind of write down the fields that you want to have. Write down and figure out logically how it's going to work, and then set it up. It will make your life 100 times easier when you're actually going through this and configuring it. So I'm not going to go through setting up all these fields. There's some other tutorials you guys can go through and look on those and get an idea of how to set everything up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go straight into the conditional logic and go over that. And so what you'll notice is whether it's resume fields or job fields, you see in the top right next to add job field, you'll see we've got that button for a logic beta. And so this is the same thing as for the company fields. They both, for job and company fields, they both run under the same logic. So you can configure those under the same thing. So it doesn't matter if you go to it from the job page or the company page, it's all the same thing. And it's also available in resume fields as well if you have the resume manager add-on included. And this is different conditional logic for resume fields, but for this example, I'm just going to go over these ones. And so you can see here in my company fields, you'll see that I do have some other ones set up in here, and you see I have include company details. So that was that checkbox that was showing that said, yes, I would like to include company details. So what I did was I set this as a very low priority, and then I went in there and I set up that logic. And then you'll see here we have include social media. And so that was basically a checkbox that I added that says, do you want to include social media? So you're going to have to kind of think about it, how you want it set up. And then that's why I recommend doing it on pencil and paper, because it'll be a lot more difficult if you're trying to do it, just off your whim, trying to set everything up. So you'll see that in there, and you'll come to this page, and you'll see we've got here now we don't have any groups available, and there's nothing over here because we don't have anything set up. So the first thing you're going to have to do is create a new group. So we're going to come in here, we're going to say create new group. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to actually go ahead and set up the company details one. And so that was the one I was just showing you there. And let's go ahead and let me just have those fields open so I can jump back and forth between them and show you guys how it's actually set up and what the fields are. And so you'll see here we have this include company details checkbox. So what I'm going to do is in my head, so what I want to do if I'm thinking about this logically is I only want to show all of those company fields if that checkbox is checked. So first we're going to set up a group, and you have to configure the group before you can set up any logic. So I'm going to go ahead and say include company details. And then I'm going to want to show, and you'll see, you set a group name here and make it unique so you know what it is over here on the left, because in an upcoming release I'm going to start adding different stuff in here, where you can see if it's disabled, you can see how many fields you have set up in there, stuff like that. So just keep it unique so you know what it is. And you'll see here we now have different types that we can set. The type is the action that any of your logic, when it equates to true, is going to actually execute on the fields. So from here, what I'm going to do is, and this is why I was mentioning earlier, when I was spent a lot of time coming up and designing the way that the logic was going to work, when you think about it logically, you're thinking in your head, okay, I want to show these fields when this is checked. So what we're going to do is we're going to select show. We'll leave it enabled. If you want, you can disable it. It's totally up to you. Basically what's going to happen is if it's disabled, it's not going to run any logic or do anything, but it'll still be here, so you can come back to it later if you want and enable it, change it, whatever you want to do. So now what I'm going to do is now I'm going to have to click here, and now I want to select all of the company fields that I want this to, or at least for this, my logic I'm setting up, all the fields I want this to apply to. So what fields do I want to show? So I'm going to select company name, company tagline, description, video, website, and then let's include, so our social media one here. So I'm going to include that as well. Now, let's include company logo as well. Now you notice, so I have company name, tagline, description, video, website, then I have include social media and the company logo. So basically what that's telling the logic is, you'll see here, so we have the include company details. So then we have the name, logo, tagline, description, video, website, and then this checkbox right here. And so we're going to basically we're setting all these fields right here that we want to hide all these fields. And now I'm going to come back to these social media ones here in a minute, but I'm just going to show you real quick. So we want to hide all of these fields. So come back over here, and we're going to go ahead and say this. We're going to go ahead and save the configuration. Once you could save the configuration, you have this group, it's set up, and you'll notice it'll show up over here. And if you guys use any of my other plugins, you probably already know that I'm a very big fan of Ajax and no page reloads. And that's kind of, goes back to what I had mentioned previously, is that, when I build plugins, I'm thinking about these plugins as if this was something I'm going to use on my site. So I want them to be built, as optimized, as fast, and as bloat-free as possible, because I do not want my plugin to be something slowing down anybody's site. And I want it to run as fast as it can, because honestly, when things work and they work right, I mean, it benefits everybody. So what you'll see here is that now, so basically what I was getting at is that, there aren't going to be any page reloads. So everything's already done here. There's no reason to load the whole menu and everything else again when this is the only thing that's changed. So now once you save the group, you'll see now we get this, it shows up here before, where we have the group conditional logic. Now here is where you're going to define the logic that will have to equal true in order to execute this. So when I want to show these fields, what do I want to equal true, whatever it is. So you'll notice here we have, on this part, we have if. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to select, and then I'm going to pick include company details. That's that checkbox we set up earlier at the very top of our thing. That's a checkbox. Yes, I would like to include the details. So I'm going to set that up. I'm going to select that as my first if statement. And then you'll notice right next to it, we have a drop down. And so this drop down, you have a bunch of different comparisons that you can use that will check against whatever value you put next to it. So, is not, is greater than, less than, starts with, does not start with, ends with. All these different ones are available for you. So in this instance, and if you read the documentation on the page, you'll notice, so in this beta version, the value right here, this area, right now you have to manually enter in what the value is. In an upcoming release, when you select one of these fields over here, this value field is automatically going to change and be a drop down or an input box based on the field that you select. And it's going to say, so, in this instance, since this was a checkbox, when you selected that, this over here is going to turn into a drop down that's going to say checked or unchecked. And then, if it's a taxonomy, then it's going to say, it's going to list all the different taxonomies, so you can select it from there. For right now, that's not available, but that is coming. So for a checkbox, the way it's going to work is, for now, is a checkbox is considered checked when it is equal to 1. If it is equal to 0, that means it's unchecked. So for here, I'm going to put is 1. So if company details, if that's 1, then I want to show these fields. So the way this works, and if you didn't watch the previous overview, the way this works is the way I had to come up with this when designing the way for it to work is that, when you think about it logically, you're thinking, I want to show these fields when this equals this. So the way this works is when the page loads, it's going to look through all these different group logics, and if this group logic has type set to show, then the fields are going to be hidden by default. Okay, I'm going to give you a second to let that sit in. So if a field is set in a group applied fields and the group type is show, by default, those fields will be hidden. So what that means is that now when we set this up and this actually looks at this, as long as this equates out to true, then we're going to show all these fields. And this one is just a simple one, and we'll go into a more detailed example, but you'll notice here on the right, we now have, there's a little and button. So you can click here and say and. So you can make these very intricate based on different fields and select, and you'll notice you can't select any of the fields that are being applied to, and that's, obviously if you think about it, like that would make no sense because you can't. So in each one of these, what I call a section, so you see here we have a section here, which is if, this field equals this, and this equals this, and all these ands. So all of these have to equal out to true in order for this to apply. Now, you can take that even further by adding or statements, and that's what this little round circle plus over here is. Or you can click right here. It's going to add a conditional section. So you see there, now it shows up and it says if, company details is 1, let me go ahead and remove this one. So if company details is 1, which is checked, or, and we could select something out, or this other checkbox is checked. Basically what that means is that if anything in this section equates out to true, then execute this, show these fields. If anything in this section equates to true, show these fields. And so we'll go a little bit deeper, and I'll give you guys some more examples of those later on. I just wanted to show you how each one of these goes through, and we'll go a little bit more into the different sections and everything. But it's, as you can see, you can clearly come up with many different logics that you want to set up and kind of go through based on how you want your fields to work. And so let's just go ahead and go over here. So this was still on our demo page. Let's reload this page. Now, for right now, since we only have that company one set up, you're going to see all of our fields because, I've already set up all those fields, but we haven't set up the logic for them yet. So all this logic is showing, but that's just because we haven't configured them yet. So you come down here and you'll notice now we have our company details. And remember these social media ones, I said we'll come back to those in a second. I just want to show you real quick how this works. So now you'll see when we check that box, it shows all those fields. So that conditional logic that we have set up here, all these fields show these fields when this field equals 1, which is checked. So there you go. So we see that it's unchecked, and now all those fields are hidden. So let's go ahead and do the actual social media stuff. So we'll come back over here, and we're going to create another group. And now this other group we're going to set up here, and this is going to be based on our social media stuff. And so come here, and I'm going to, let's call this, company social media. So we're going to set this show, and then we're going to enable this. And so we're going to come back, and we're going to select, we'll do Facebook. And it's actually, let's just select them from here. So Facebook, Google, and LinkedIn, and Twitter. And so if you remember earlier, what I was telling you was that these fields will automatically be hidden if you have a group type set up to set them to show. So by default, they will be hidden. That's why we didn't put these fields in this other one for include company details, because we're setting up this other group that's already going to hide them. Now you can set it up in the other ones, it's just not necessary to do, mainly just because you have other conditional logic. And so when we're going to come in here, so then we're going to select this one, and then we set up a checkbox, if you remember, over here, which was company checkbox include social media. So here's our social media. Yes, I want to include it. Let's go back over here, and then we're going to find that checkbox that we had, and then we're going to set this 1 to 1. And so this is just like we set up with the last one, where it's just, 1 is checked. And so we could do is not checked, or you could do is 0, which would be unchecked. So again, checkboxes, 1 is checked, 0 is unchecked. So we'll go ahead and save that. And like I mentioned, because we have this set up, the group type set up to show, by default those fields will be hidden. So now when we refresh this page, it's going to hide those fields, and that's because the way that it works is it's hiding all of these fields. When the page loads, it says, okay, this checkbox is not checked, so I'm going to hide all these fields. And then you'll see we basically have a nested, shall we say, logic set up, because now we come over here and include company details, we have just that checkbox that's hidden. So we don't need to put Facebook and Twitter and all those in here. Like I said, you can, but it's not necessary. And so, we have that set up. So now all of our company fields ones are set up, and I think that's all I did on those ones. Yeah. So now company details are good. So now we can go back here, and we can start setting up some logic for our different categories and developers and all that stuff to start hiding some of these fields. So let's go back over here, and let's go ahead and set up a, let's go with create this group, and we'll go ahead and set up, let's go ahead and set up one of our taxonomy ones. So we'll say programmer category. So on this one, the programmer category is a category that we have. So I'm going to set this to show, and let's actually open these fields so we can go back and see these. So we'll set this programmer category, and now you'll see here I have a developer type. So right here, dev front end or back end. And so I'm going to basically create some more nested logic and show you how it's set up. And so this is this radio button on the front that says, you know, what type of developer are you? Are you a front end or a back end developer? And so what that means is that, you know, in this logic we're about to set up, so we're going to take this, so whenever they select the job category, then we're going to show this and say, okay, are you a front end or a back end developer? And then if they select back end, then we're only going to want to show the back end languages. You know, we're not going to want to show the front end. And then only if they select PHP do we want to show PHP experience. So we'll come back over here and we'll just go ahead and set this one up, and then we'll say dev front end or back end. So whenever they select this category that we're going to set here, whenever they select this, then we want to show this field. So as mentioned before, since it's a show group type, by default this is going to be hidden unless any of this logic equates out to true. So now what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you how to set up taxonomy. So the taxonomy here, this one is going to be the job category. Let's just go ahead and search for it. Job category. So as I mentioned before, with job categories, it's going to, or with taxonomies, you know, in a future release, it's going to, this over here will automatically populate and turn into a drop down where you can select from the different available categories. For now, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to actually figure out what the taxonomy ID is, and I'm going to show you here real quick how to do that. It's very simple and quick and easy to do, but you're going to want to figure that out, and then you can put those values into here. So let's go ahead and figure out what this category is. So I'm going to open this up. So what you're going to want to do to find the taxonomy ID, go to the section where you edit the different taxonomies. So for this one, it's going to be job category. So we're going to go to job category, and we want to find the job category that is programmer. So in this programmer one, right here, you'll notice that whenever you hover over the edit link, it's going to give you a different URL that you can actually see. And then let me go ahead and copy that for you. And so you can click on this and you can go to the page, and it'll show the URL in the top of your browser bar. I'm just going to show you this here, right here. And so you'll see once we get that URL, and let's just go ahead and remove most of this on here. You'll notice right here in the URL to edit that thing, we have tag ID equals 54. That 54 right there is the ID that we want. So I know it's a little tedious right now, but that's, you know, I wanted to get this feature out before spending too much time trying to get, you know, selecting taxonomy, stuff like that done. So it may take you a little bit longer just to switch over here and figure out what the ID is, but once you know how to do it, it's very quick and easy to do. So again, you know, you can click on edit, and then it'll actually show you the URL in your browser bar, or you can just right click and copy link address, and then, you know, just paste it in here, and then you can see, you know, tag ID 54. So we know that the tag ID for this programmer is going to be 54. So now we'll come back over here. We're going to say if job category is 54. Now you can also select, you know, one of these other different ones here. So is not, and I'll go through this in a minute when we get over to some of the multi-select drop downs. So right now the job category is just a standard select. So basically with standard select, you're just going to want to use is or is not. In the multi-selects, once you get over there, we'll be able to use is greater than, is less than, to determine if it's, you know, more than these many options have been selected. But I'll go through that in a second. Let's just go ahead and save this one real quick just to get this set up. Okay, and so now we've got the programmer category set up. So now that's only going to show this field whenever this actually equates out to true, when that job category is selected, which is our programmer one. So let's go ahead and create our different front end and our back end ones. So as you remember, we had the front end developer and then we had a back-end one as well. So we're going to want to go ahead and set up the front-end one. And so on the front-end one for our fields, for our front-end developer, and that's why I kind of labeled them, dev front-end, so I know which one's associated with which. So on the front-end one, we're only going to want to do just the languages. So I'm going to come back over here to this, select here, and then I'm going to do front-end languages. And I also want to use, so we have, go back over here. Let's actually close out the taxonomy one. So let's come over here. And so you'll notice on here I also have dev years experience. So I also want to handle this field because this dev years experience is going to be for front end or back end. It doesn't matter which one it is. We just want it to show whether it's for either one of them, regardless on what they select. So now we can come back here and we're gonna include that one as well. So do years experience, that, click save, and then we're gonna come here, and so the field I set up for this, dev front end or back end, is a radio field, and you'll see with radio buttons, and you'll see under the options I set it up front end and back end. And so these are two different options you can have here. So the value, the whatever is in here, right here, the value, this is what you want to check. And so on here, it's going to be front end is what we're going to want to use. So we'll go back to our conditional fields, and then we're going to say dev front end or back end, developer type is front end. Now, this is where a good point where I'm going to show you the settings that are available for the conditional logic. Let's go ahead and save this real quick. Now, you'll notice on that job field, the front end was actually capitalized, but the one I put in here is not capitalized. So if you go into the field editor settings, you'll notice under the field editor settings that you now have a new tab, Logic. So if you click on Logic, you're going to see we have two options right now, and obviously I'll add more as time goes on. But the field editor settings, the options we have here, first one is case sensitivity. So you'll notice by default this is not enabled, and I strongly recommend against enabling this unless you know what you're doing or you have a specific way it needs to be formatted. Mainly because you have no idea if your clients are going to be capitalizing it or not. So when you check your conditional logic, you don't want a condition to fail if they capitalized, F when typing in an input box or whatever it is. So I strongly recommend keeping this disabled. Do not enable this unless you know what you're doing. And so that's where I was kind of getting at, if it is front end or not. The second option we have here is Keyup Delay. So you'll notice here, and you can read that as well. So the way that it works, and I think it actually, let's hold off on that. I'll come back to that on one of the next fields we're going to go through where I can actually show you an example of how that works. So we've got our front end developer one set up, and let's go ahead and set up our back end one as well. So back end developer. And on this one, we're going to want to set it up to where we show fields as well. And so just like the front end one, we're going to want to show the dev years experience. We're going to want to show the back end languages. So I'm going to click save. And then again, we're going to select dev front end or back end. And this one is going to be back end because this is the opposite, the other option that was available. So we got that. We're going to save that. Okay. Now you'll see, let's go ahead and reload this page, and let's just see what fields we still have showing. I think it's going to be that PHP experience and a couple more. So okay, so we've got this job title, we've got a category, so PHP experience. So let's go ahead and set that one up real quick. So we'll come back here, and then we're going to set up PHP experience because this is a field that I only want to show. So whenever the user, let's actually select programmer so we can see it, and then backend, So we only want to show this PHP experience if somebody selects PHP from this field. That's the only time we're going to want it to show. So let's go ahead and set that up. I'll come in here, PHP experience, and then we're going to select that field, which if we go back to our field, dev back in PHP experience. So we're going to want to show that field. And I'm keeping these examples as simple as possible just so it doesn't confuse you guys too much. But as you can see, I mean, you can clearly create very complex and intricate logic really for any kind of setup that you would like. So now we're going to do dev backend languages, because that is the drop down that we have here, which is the backend languages, which, if you remember, the backend languages is only going to show whenever that backend developer one is selected. So we're going to select that, and then we're going to put PHP, and I'll go ahead and show you those options real quick. Set up. Now I set this one up as a multi-select. Now this will be a good one to show and go through and explain to you guys the different available options. So you'll see here we have PHP, Node.js, Ruby, and now you'll notice I put mine lowercase, but here the value is capitalized. It's still going to work because I didn't enable case sensitivity. So with this being a multi-select, let's go ahead and go through that real quick. So with this being a multi-select, if I were to select is PHP, well, let's go ahead and, let's save this. Let me just show you exactly how that works. So you'll see here we selected this. So this is this field right here, backend languages, is a multi-select field. So that means you can select multiple options. So I selected is. So let's go here and let's go back to post a job. Let's refresh this. Okay, and then let's go ahead and select programmer, and then backend, and PHP. Now you notice it shows PHP. Now let's try something else. Let's try it like Node.js and PHP. Oh, that field didn't show. Why isn't it showing? I'll show you why it's not showing. The reason being is because when you use is on a multi-select field, is equates to is the only one selected, is not the only one selected. Does that make sense? I'll let that set in for a second. When you're using this on a multi-select field, the is comparison means that it is only this one selected. Nothing else is selected, only this. If we wanted it to be, if any of them is selected, then what you would use is contains. So if this contains PHP, that means it can have any other options can be selected, but if PHP is selected, show this. So now when I save it, we go back to this page, we refresh, you'll notice we'll be able to select Node as well as PHP because it contains that one. So again, with multi-select fields, is means is the only one selected, is not means is not the only one selected. See, so now PHP experience shows, and that's because we set it up with contains. So just make sure when you're setting those up, because I know I'm going to get a bunch of support tickets from people saying, well, why isn't it showing when you select it? It's all based on the logic that you configure and the way you configure it. And like I said, in an upcoming release, there's going to be a lot of new features included, and including even like here right now, you can only select meta fields right now, but soon you're going to be able to also select, if user role is this, or if user name is this, user email. There's going to be a bunch of different type of other logics that you can use. For now, this is just the logics that are available for the meta keys, but it is going to be have a lot more stuff that's available in an upcoming release. So we want to keep that as contains unless we only want that's the only one we want selected. So that one is set up. That's good to go. We've already saved it. So we have that one. So now let's come down here. So now we've got the file language in the job description field. So this field, let's go over here. You'll see this is this one right here. This is an HTML field that I set up. So I set up this field, and right here And obviously, as you can see, you can use HTML in the description area. You could use it in the label as well. I just don't want a label to show up. So you see how it says featured image. That, unless you wanted a little label to show right above it, then just leave it blank. So you'll see here, please do not enter foul language in the job description. And so what I did was I set that priority so it's right above the job description field. So you see it's right above the job description field. And so we're going to come in here and let's go ahead and say add this group, and we'll do job description foul words. And this one was very, very interesting to deal with, and it was just based on the way that WP editor fields are initialized and actually set up. And it was interesting to say the least. So let's go ahead and let's see what that field was again. It was job description notice. And see, that's why it's good to set these up with names that are easy for you to understand. I'll start on, in the next release, I'll make sure that the label is included on here to give you guys more details and descriptions of what each one is. Let's go here, job description notice. So we want to show job description notice, and you could have multiple ones set up for this, as well. And so job description notice, and so now we're going to want to do this whenever the job description. And so here's where I'm going to go ahead and show you an example of using the OR logic, which was, if you remember earlier, we added the different sections where you can add as many different sections as you want. We're going to do that with just 2 of them for now. So you could say, job description, and we're going to use contains, because that means that there can be other text around it. And we'll just use as a foul word. So if you wanted to check, if multiple words are contained, so if job description contains this and this contains this and this contains this, you can set up really what you want. So if you only wanted to show it if another field has this value and it also has this in it, or if it's not an administrator, which that'll be in a future release. Let me not get too far ahead of myself. So let's take it back to this one. So, and then we'll come back here and we'll do job description, and then we'll say contains, and then we'll just use another curse word. And what you'll notice is on your and statements, since I've already selected job description here, you'll notice that you're not going to be able to select job description again. And if you think about it logically, you shouldn't be able to, because if you're going to be selecting this and it's going to have this and it's this, it's going to make it very convoluted for handling your different logics. So in each section, and that's why there are these sections, so you have the OR that separates them. So this section, you can select it here, but you'll notice this separate section, I can now select it again. The only fields you won't be able to select in any of the logic are fields that you have configured for the group up here. So you'll notice the description notice is going to be grayed out so that you can't actually select it. And that's, obviously if you think about it, that's the way it works. So let's go ahead and just save these. Okay. And let's go back to the page and let's take a look at how that works. And of course I get a warning when I have my debugging on. So let me go ahead and disable that. Oh, you see, look, there's a little bit of a bug right there. So from me adding and removing all those fields, something funny happened. I'm not sure what. And it's telling me we can't update because they are all the same. So if something like this happens, so this is a good example right here. So I've obviously ran into some kind of a bug that's on here where it's loading on the page, and so now it was showing that error because I have debugging enabled. So the easiest way to try and fix something like that, if instead of waiting for a response from me, which let me know about these things and I'll investigate this bug later on, the easiest way to fix something like this is just going to be to delete it and then add it again. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one and I'll add it back in. And chances are the problem with that was due to me adding and deleting all those different rows in the sections. So I'll definitely look into that. But just it's good for you guys to have seen that, so that if something does like this happen, then you know that the best way to fix this or resolve something like that is just to go back, set it up again. Delete the configuration and set it up again. Same thing even with the fields. When you're configuring fields in here, if you're having some type of an issue and it's not working correctly, you're having this, that, the easiest way, go delete it. Delete the field, or at least the field configuration, which is what delete does, unless it's a custom field. Delete it and then add it back again. Even if you have to open up another window, because everything's done in JavaScript and Ajax, so if you delete it on here, this page will still be loaded. So even if you have to, come over here, click delete, delete a field, and then just click over here and then edit, click edit, and then save. That's basically, you won't have to set any of this up again. It's basically just going to save it again. So, you could delete it here, and then just come back over here with that same field, click save, bam. It's just like when you want to duplicate a field, you can change the meta key and put something else here, and you can click save. It'll duplicate this field, but that way you don't have to set up all this configuration all over again. So go through that little tidbit real quick. Troubleshooting 101, we'll call it. So let's go back over here and set this up. So job description contains, we'll say S, and then we'll add another section. We'll do job description contains, and I actually put add, didn't I? And we'll save this configuration. So now let's go back and let's see if that fixed our problem. There we go. See, so clearly there was something weird that I did, by adding and removing all those different rows and sections. But as you can see, I just removed it and then set it up again, and now it fixed the problem. So let's go ahead and go down here and preview how this works. So in the description, we'll say, hi, hello, this is a demo, ass. And you'll notice there it shows that field. So what you may have noticed, and I'll go over this here in a minute as well, you may have noticed is when I type in the field, so I type A, S, S, you'll notice there's about it's actually a quarter of a second, so 250 milliseconds before it actually triggers that. That is called the debounce. That is what that other setting was in here, the Keyup Delay. It's technically called a debounce, but I put it in here as Keyup Delay to make it easier to understand. So that is the amount of time that the logic will wait before, the code base will wait before checking the logic. Now, I do not recommend changing this. The only time I would recommend changing this is if you are having performance issues. I would raise it to a higher number, maybe 500. Reason being is basically what happens, and just to give you a real quick overview, what happens is whenever you come in here and you think about it in a logic standpoint from a code point of view, I have to check, or my code has to check every time somebody types a character. So every character they type, we need to check and say, hey, did this equal out to this? Is this logic true now? Is this is it now? Is it now? So on and so forth. So the way that works is, and like I mentioned before, wanting to make sure all my plugins are optimized and work as fast as possible. This was obviously a no-brainer for me to have to include, because what's happening is a change event is being sent to my code base that is going to check the logic. So if you hit a key and a key and a key and a key and a key, each key you hit, that's going to be a change, which is going to be sent to my logic. So you don't want to check the logic every single key that's hit, especially if somebody's in the middle of typing. So the way to get around that and to fix that and to be optimal and fast about that is to use what's called a debounce. And so that basically is my code base saying, when this D change, my code base is saying, hey, it hasn't been more than 250 milliseconds. I'm not checking yet. I'm not checking yet. I'm not checking yet. So it goes through that kind kind of process in which is just debouncing it, saying not yet, nope, not yet. So when you do sit it, so it's, you know, ASS. So it waits that 250 milliseconds for no change event to happen. So there's literally a quarter of a second that has to go by before no change event happens, and then it'll check the logic. That when I did my testing on that and performance testing, it was a huge difference in amount of performance that was gained by doing this. And I did do some research on it, and the average user interaction debounce that is most popular in the industry is about 250 milliseconds. So you can change it if you want, it's totally up to you, but 250 milliseconds is kind of about the standard that there is out there. So now I do notice that we have, I don't think we set up our full-time one here. I just noticed that one, we don't. So I also have this one, this salary field here. We only want to show this salary field when the position is a full-time position. So let's go ahead and set that guy up real quick. But you see, this is how you can create different OR sections to set it up how you want. So let's say we'll say full-time job type. And then we want to show, and it's going to be job salary. Go ahead and save that. And then we're going to select job type. And now here we go. Since the job type is a taxonomy as well, so now we're going to need to go back over to our job types. Like I mentioned before, we'll go over to the job type. And then you can either, so since we're going to be doing full-time, you can either click on edit and then just look at the URL in your browser, or you can copy it, totally up to you. I'm just doing this just so you guys can see it since my URL bar is not shown above. And again, what we're going to be looking for is this right here, this argument, tag ID equals. And if you hover over the edit, you can actually see it in the bottom left-hand corner. So I don't know if you guys can see that down in the bottom left, but you'll see it shows the URL, and you can see tag equals 2. So we know that's what the ID number is. So go over here, we're going to say is 2. And now this field is actually going to be used coming up for one of our ands, which I'm going to show you in a second how that works. But just know we're going to be coming back to this one in just a minute. But for now, we're just going to set it as that. And then let's go ahead and refresh this page. And you'll notice, so when the page loaded, salary is showing. Salary is showing because the default selected option on here is full-time. You know, if I change it to this, or if this was the default selected option, the salary one would not be showing. You know, and this kind of goes into what I was talking about before with figuring out how the logic is going to work about previous states of all these different fields, and how we're going to kind of move forward with that. So the next one I'm going to go through and I'm going to set up is a kind of a wrapper, and this one's going to be actually a hide configuration. And the way this one's going to work is this is going to be the one that we're going to use for actually handling not showing any of the fields until somebody has actually typed in a job, like an actual title. So hide all until job has title. And then we're going to select hide. And then here, I'm going to select company name, tagline, description, video, website, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn. And I'm basically selecting all of these because I do not want any of these to show. So even though I have them configured in other logic, I don't want them to show until somebody's actually entered a title. The only one that I'm going to leave open to show is, let's leave the so the company details. So when I like to show company details, so we're going to leave that one open, which is going to be that checkbox. So include social media. Nope. Let's hide that one. Include company details. That's going to be the one we're going to leave up there. So let's go ahead and location, application, which should be disabled. Job type, category, featured image, description, salary. And we're basically just going to hide all of these besides our own job title, because that's what we're going to be using. Oop. So really the only one we want left showing is include company details, because that's going to be the one to show the company details. So go ahead and click Save. I'm going to come here, and then I'm going to select Job Title, because this is the one we're going to use. And so we're going to hide all of these fields if Job Title is empty. And now we can save the configuration this way, because if you don't put a field in here and you leave it as is, then that means is empty. It means there is no value in that field. And this will kind of show you that debounce we were just talking about as well. We go over here, and this should show how the different logic kind of became an issue where, and I'll show you here in a second. So you'll notice now all of those fields are hidden. So the page loads, all those fields are hidden because there is nothing in the job title. And the only one we didn't include was our company details, which is here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead, and so again, that debounce we were just talking about. So title one, see, it's literally, I can't even say a second before it goes. So if I were to come in here to these settings, and we'll go ahead and let's change this to 1000. 1000 milliseconds equals 1 second. The configuration here is based on the milliseconds. So whatever you put in here is milliseconds. So right here, that means let's wait a second. So instead of waiting for a quarter of a second, now it's going to wait a full second after I stop typing before it actually checks the logic. So title, 1 second, 2 seconds. So see right there, that's what the debounce does. So the higher the value, the longer the wait, the lower the value. And we just set that back to 250, or you can just leave that blank and save it as an empty field, and it will use the default, which is 250. So we'll come back over here. Go and refresh this page. Now we have our job title. So let's put in a title. There's a title. So now we come down here. You see we have this set as full type. Well, it's going to be a freelance, not a full type. Now wait, what's going on? So you see here we select freelance, but salary field is still showing. This is where the whole situation arose with me, and slamming my head on the table trying to figure out why this field didn't hide or why it didn't do this or that. And mainly what it comes down to is the state of these fields. When you have a bunch of different logic configured on them, there are going to be situations where you have overlapping logic, and you're going to have to set up your different fields, really based on the logic that you came up in your head, which is why I recommend doing it down on paper first. So you'll see here on this issue, and this was actually planned. This is why I wanted to show you guys this. Is so the way this works is originally we had set, so if you remember, we came over here, we had set all these fields to hide if job title is empty. So what's happening is this is setting those fields to hidden. So the field, or the previous state, is going to be technically set as showing it. Now what's happening here is, in essence of us doing this, we also have this configuration that we have set on the actual job type. So we come over to our job type, full-time job type, we have it set here, and we have it set so that we want to show the salary field. So basically what we're doing here is right now we have two conflicting logic set up. So this was something that drove me insane for a while as well. So you'll notice we have it set, we want to show this field when this is this, we want to hide this field when this is this. So the way that you can fix issues like this, and that's why I'm kind of showing you this, the way you can fix issues like this is that you'll notice, so we have in here, so we have this one, and let me see this. And so you'll notice, so now we're having this problem. So we set all these fields to hide, but it's still showing this one. So let's come back over here for our full type. So how can we fix this? How can we make sure that this field does not show whenever we select that other type, and we have overlapping logic? Well, the easiest way to do this is just to add another and statement, and then we can come here and then we can say and job title is not empty. So that means that this logic will only apply whenever these settings are set. And the way it's going to work is that will actually override the logic that is applied to it to actually handle showing or hiding the different values. Let's go ahead and refresh the page. So, some title. Well, some tie. Well, I guess I can figure that out, right? And you see, now it's hidden. So basically what's happening here is this logic is saying, when I change this field, this logic is saying, okay, I am no longer, so we switch from full-time to freelance. So when it's checking this meta key, that job type that's changing, when this changes, what it's doing is it's got a trigger on this. So when this field gets changed, it's saying, is this field this? And is this field this? And so what it's doing is it's then considering this as the default configuration, which means it needs to hide that field, if that makes sense. Might confuse you guys, lost you guys a little bit there, but so as you can see, so when I change it to freelance and it's saying, hey, this field is not this, so what it's doing is checking, is this, and this field is not. Okay, well, this one has priority logic, so I'm going to set this back to technically what should be the default, which is to hide the field. Okay, so that's, I know it might be a little bit confusing, but just so you guys know, so if you have things that are going on like this, and that's just an example of how you can use the AND logic, and you can add, 5, 10 more, whatever you want to do. But that's just something to know while you're setting up your logic and going through it. If you run into little issues like this, just go back to your configuration, check out your configuration, see what configurations you have, because that was one of the biggest things that was throwing me through a loop and had me, pacing in circles for hours, was figuring out the different logics. And then when you have logic that overlaps other logic, who takes priority? Did I need to set up a priority value you could put in there and just make things more convoluted and more difficult for people to set up? Really what it came down to is having these default states. And like I said, I decided that the easiest way to set this up is what's going to be easiest for everybody else, and it's the way to think about it in your head, is that I want to show this field when job type is this and job title is not empty. So that's just an example so you guys can kind of see how the different options get set up. And like I said, as you can see, now we've got all of our stuff set up on here, and we can come in here and we can set our programmer. Then we can select backend. We'll select our PHP. See, we can select our experience. And you'll notice that, so the way this works as well is now you might not even think about this, and that's one of the things that delayed this even more, was that like even small things like required fields. So, when you submit this listing, well, what if I had a field that was a required field that is now hidden, and Job Manager is going to try and process those fields? Well, how should it process that field? Should it omit that field? Should it check all the logic? How should it go through there? So the way that it works is that if these fields are hidden, they are also technically disabled. So whenever they're hidden, they're disabled, which means they're not going to be submitted with the form whenever it's submitted. So on the back end, the PHP side of things, my software actually, or the plugin, will check the actual values to see which fields need to be required, which ones do not need to be required. And so that'll allow you to have required fields that can be hidden. So you can have, a required field. So this year's experience, is a required field, but it may be hidden if, you selected sales, or not that one. That's not a good idea, but I guess this was one on everyone. So the different fields that you have, they can be required. It can be different setups, and the sky's really the limit. So the one thing I want to point out is, just like I said before, is that just make sure when you're going through and you have you may get a bunch of these different conditional logic set up. Go back through your configuration. Look at each one of your configurations. That's why you should name these configurations that are something that gives you an understanding of what that logic is doing. Because once you're going through these and you start getting a bunch set up, it's going to be hard to go back and say, okay, well, what was my thought here? So why did I want to do this? And that's why I recommend writing it down and drawing it out yourself, getting an understanding of how your logic's going to work. Because that was one thing that was very difficult for me as well, was just coming up with example logics. And it sounds like something so simple, but when you sit down and you try and come up with examples, it's not that easy. And so, having to be able to test this and, find bugs and figure out where an issues are, based on this logic, on top of this logic, applied with this logic. There could be 100 different ways it could go. So that's why I'm hoping, if you guys run into issues, that you'll let me know, so that I can have these other use case scenarios, so I know what to test against and what to check against. But like I said, make sure if it stops working, don't just immediately run to submit a support ticket and say, hey, the plugin's broken, it doesn't work at all. Did you check your configuration? Maybe you have some overlapping configuration on a field that you forgot about that you set up. And do you really want me to spend the time that I could be working on adding features to this and adding new features that extend this? Or would you rather me having to log into your account and then come back to you and say, hey, it's because your configuration's wrong? So that's one thing I ask of you guys, is just make sure that you check all your configuration. If it looks right and it should be working, you're having issues, just let me know. I'll be more than happy to help you guys. Like I said, it's been a long time in the works, and I'm very happy to be able to finally release this. I didn't show you any of the enable disables, but it is an option you have available there. I know some people had requested them so that they could disable certain fields later on, and that's I kind of included that in there as well. But I'll go ahead and show you over here as well. And this works as well for fields whenever you edit them as well. So I didn't submit that listing, but you'll notice that whenever the page loads, it's going to work. It'll automatically check all of your fields. So that was another roadblock out of the many that so you can see here. So yes, this was checked. So I had to go through each field and make sure and check the logic on that field when it's loaded. So this is not checked, so I don't want to show these fields. So I had to kind of get the user interaction as well as the initial page loading, on top of adding the different types of fields, the WP editor, which is handled in JavaScript, multi-select fields, which are totally different. There's 100 different things that there could have been. And so one thing I think I forgot to point out, which I'll go through real quickly, is on the different, and this is probably not the best one to do example under, so let's go to, which one did I put that under? My brain's starting to fart. Oh, PHP experience. So, okay, yeah, so dev backend languages. So, for multi-selects, as I'd mentioned before, is means is the only one selected, is not means is not the only one selected, contains means is one of the ones selected, does not contain means is not one of the ones selected. Now you'll notice we also have is greater than and is less than. You can also use is greater than to say greater than 3, and what that's going to do logic-wise is that's going to check and say, okay, is more than 3 options selected? And it's going to, if that's true, then it's going to execute this logic. If you do is less than 3 options selected. This is only for the multi-select fields. It works for both taxonomy and regular multi-select fields. But just so you guys know, that's another feature that's available there. And in an upcoming release, like I said, this whole over here entering the options and the different values, these are all going to be automatically populated. But for now, this is the way it's set up. I hope you guys are as excited as I am about this. I know a ton of you have been waiting on it, and I can't wait to hear what you guys do with this stuff. And hopefully this makes your site easier for you to use, for your clients to use, and hopefully help you prosper in the end. So I appreciate you guys watching, and hope to hear from you soon. Thanks.